I'm watching through Top Boy right now for the second time, and I forgot a lot of things that happened. And I'm rewatching it. It feels like I'm watching it for the first time because I forgot so much. And there's so many stories and emotions that I understand firsthand. I would say a lot of my life is depicted in the show. I understand a lot of emotions and a lot of situations in the show, and I kind of forget not only about the show that I once watched a long time ago, but also how my life used to be as a young kid. I was watching when Ats dies in I don't know, he's just dead, and basically Steph has gone to where they've people have paid tribute and stuff, and this girl comes up and she takes like a chocolate bar or something. And Steph and this girl, they go back to her yard, and there's her little sister there, and she asks her, it's a bit of a dingy place, and she's asked the little sister, have you seen mum? She's like, nah. And she smells her and she's like, oh, you stink, man, you need a wash. And then Steph takes out a chocolate bar, and her little sister's like, oh, give me some of that. And she takes nearly the whole thing. She's hungry. And I remember as a kid myself being hungry, being a bit of a dingy place, not having a wash, no one really there. And I know that feeling. And it's upsetting because sometimes I forget how that felt as a kid. You don't really think about it too much when you're in the situation. You think about it a little bit after, but it's been so long since I felt like that I've actually forgot about how it felt. And when I watch it again, all those feelings come back, and I just feel so upset for not only myself, but all the kids that grew up like myself in certain situations. I was talking about earlier about the story of Jason and with Sully. His mum was a crackhead, and he was neglected to the fullest, and it was a completely different story, so much worse, and yet it's just the same amount of upset, right? It's just a kid that doesn't have a parent there to love him. They don't care for him. And it's upsetting because the only reason, or most of the time the reason, is because the parent they never had a parent that looked after them. And it's just a revolving circle of neglect, constant neglect, generation after generation after generation. I think to myself a lot of the time, how would you even go about fixing these problems? It's so hard because for us to fix these problems, like the culture that we have in these types of places, like where I grew up, have to change. And if they don't, this is just going to carry on being the case. We live in London in a place where a lot of us are poor, and the most important thing on everyone's mind is making money. The reality is we can't all be rich, we can't all make it because of the way the system is, right? Even if you're living a nice life, let's say you have 30k, a lot of people still have their mind on being rich because that is everything to do with capitalism. We all want to be rich, but most of us are poor. And because we fight for just that one thing, a bit of paper, it just becomes our God. And because of that, people will do anything to get it. Sell drugs, do violence, steal. After my dad passed, I had a lot of change of heart and change in my brain. And one of the things I promised myself, out of many things I promised myself after my dad passed, was to not sell my soul in any way for money. If that meant me being on the streets homeless, so be it. And I realised, just like many other things, is these things only matter to me because my dad died. And I know a lot of people don't have that type of trauma or that type of timing for two things to come at once, where their heart and their mind change all at the same time. And I understand that I'm quite lucky, right? But if you're someone that's watching this and you are doing things that you don't agree with to make money, change it now, man, because selling your soul is never worth it. I don't know why these types of conversations always go into this money thing, but I feel like it always is created from that. You know, you have a poor kid, they want money. How do they get it? They ain't got the skills, they ain't got the structure. What they do? You know what they do. And it's always the same thing over and over again because they don't have guidance. They don't have someone there looking after them, and it always happens. You know, I look at Sully as such a good example of the type of people that grow up in these situations. You can tell that actually, although Sully is a bit of a loose cannon sometimes, and he's definitely aggressive and violent, he does actually care, non-stop. When Pebbles comes to him, you know, we haven't seen this girl at all. You know, with a drop of a pin, he's there to try and help her, no matter what. And he doesn't love in the right way, but he loves in the only way he knows possible. But the reality is, if you had someone like Sully, you never let him grow up around these areas without these people, and he was in a family of just normal goers in a normal area, and he went to school and he did what he did just like every other kid. I can almost guarantee you he would never have even ended up in a situation where he's at now. And it goes for a lot of them, right? Yeah, some people will always find their way, of course, but the majority would never even touch these things. So how much is it the fault of the person doing these things, and how much is it the fault of the system being broken, allowing these things, these destroyed family units in an area riddled with drugs and violence and gangs? How much is it the fault of the person, and how much is it the fault of the system? You know, I go back and forth from a very nice area and a very bad area. And I look round and I think it's such a joke how one area just has the luxury of all these nice things, constantly nice. And I go over to this bad area and you can't even find a playground for a kid without a couple of needles on the floor. Anyway, I'm gonna stop it there before I rant all night. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.